Welcome to the Music for the Soul podcast, where we talk honestly about difficult things. This is a place where music, hope, and healing come together. I'm Becky Nordquist.
And I'm Steve Seiler. Thanks so much for joining us. We're delighted to have with us today Carmen Leal. Carmen is an author and has also been an advocate for caregiving. She has a rich and varied background, and we're going to hear about it today. Carmen, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I was so honored to get that email.
I'm trying to remember, I think that, was it you that first reached out to me because you heard something on the radio, or me that first reached out to you?
I reached out, and I remember vividly, I was driving. I was in Hawaii. I was contracted to write a book based on the 23rd Psalm. It was a whole series of gift books. And I was driving, and I heard you, I think, on Midday Connection.
Yes.
And you were talking about the song 23. And I heard that song, and I was so moved. And I had no idea who Scott Propane was. And I loved his voice. And I literally pulled over to the side of the road to listen to the rest of the interview. And then I tracked you down, and I called you. And what I love about you is you're very accessible. With all of your decades of success, all the people you know, everything you do, you're never too much of a swelled head to pick up the phone, answer an email. And I really appreciate that. And so I called you and I said, hey, I have a book about Psalm 23. You have a song. What can we do? So that's how that happened.
Well, and I have that book. I am happy to tell you. It is sitting on my desk right now. I see it every day. I love the cover, and it just is a source of peace and joy for me to have that book in my office.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Well, and then after that, after we met that way, you started working on something for a conference setting.
Yeah, let's, back up a little. You said I have a rich and varied. The translation is I've had a lot of crummy stuff happen in life. That's the translation. And we can either wallow in the crumminess of life, or we can say, hey, how can I turn this into something that's going to glorify God, that's going to help others? Because you're either going to have that mindset that Satan wins again, or you're going to say, not that God needs help, but I'm going to help God win again. So I never wanted to be a writer. It started when my husband got a diagnosis of Huntington's disease. And some of your listeners are in tears just hearing that disease. It's a horrible disease. I was his caregiver for 8 years. It always ends in death. It always tends to destroy your family, your finances. It's wicked. And I think we made a mistake of relocating to a different state, thinking it would be more affordable. But what we did was we lost all of our support system, and we had no insurance for him. And what I found when you lose support system is it's one thing to go to people and say, this is happening in my life. And they say, I love you already. I'm going to be there for you, which is what our church did when we were back home in Hawaii. But when we moved to our new state and going to the church we had selected, which was a mega church, and saying, hey, I have this problem. Can you help me? It was basically, yeah, no, I don't know you. Or we have a benevolence fund and you can apply for $300. Or, here's a list of resources. Here's some food banks. Here's government agencies. What I didn't find was churches that had an active and thriving caregiver ministry. I reached out to Lifeway Christian Bookstore because I used to teach at Blue Ridge Writers Conference. Beautiful venue. And I had been on staff there, 4 or 5 times. So I reached out to them before they closed their doors. And I said, the church is dropping the ball on caregiving. Whether it's developmentally disabled, is it seniors, is it car wreck, whatever it is, the church is dropping the ball big time. And the Bible is very specific about helping widows and orphans. And that caregiver falls smack into that thing that we need to help widows and orphans. Well, I found an ear, and they were thrilled to help us for 2 years. We had, I think, a great conference. And it was called Someone Cares.
Mm.
And it was for how a church can start and maintain a caregiver ministry. But there was also a track for caregivers who physically came to get respite and hope. And Steve and Scott were our praise and worship, the highlight of the conference for me. I was amazed that out of my life experience and pain, God birthed this. I wish it still existed. Unfortunately, Lifeway, as you know, did close. There were budget cuts before that, and they said it's not a strong enough conference yet. And it wasn't. I mean, we were, when you're starting something new,
Sure.
our numbers were far exceeded what they expected the first 2 years. And I said, well, that's because the need is there and churches aren't filling the gap. So that's how we next had 2 wonderful projects. So
And when I heard, it was so interesting because of course we connected over 23. And then when I heard the name of your conference, Scotty and I had written a song called Someone Who
Someone Who
Cares.
Cares. Oh, great song.
Yeah, that already existed. So it really did seem like we were on the same wavelength, didn't it?
It absolutely did. And I wish this was actually a podcast where you can see the artwork, because I framed that artwork. I have a friend who was featured in all of my Caregiver and Huntington's books, and she had her husband and 3 of her 4 children died of Huntington's. And she's an artist. And so when she heard what I was doing, she said, do you want me to design a poster for you? So that's where that artwork, you may not know that, but that's where the artwork came from.
Well, it was at that conference that I met a lot of people who inspired me. I met Richard and Elizabeth Peterson there.
Yes.
And they just took my heart away.
Yeah.
And I came home the first year I was there. Of course, I didn't have any songs about caregiving, but after the conference, I went home and went into the woodshed and started carving that, And when I came back the next year, I had written a song called Dignity. And you asked me to go ahead and open the first session of the conference with it. Let's listen to a little of that right now.
A simple day to day. I long for the time when good health was mine. I miss who I used to be, and what I miss the most is my dignity.
Do you remember what happened when I finished playing that song, Carmen?
I probably don't, because I think I was crying too much.
I'll never forget this, because as a writer, you couldn't ask for a more moving response. I finished the song, and before the last chord had even faded out, somebody in the audience said, "Play it again." And so I did. And then as I was coming off the stage and you were coming up to do the announcements, you said to me, "Play it again tomorrow."
That I remember.
So it's like,
there's
wow.
a compliment for
I think they liked it.
artists, right?
I was such a puddle. One thing I love about that song is the very first thing I ever wrote related to caregiving. I was going to a Huntington's disease conference, and they asked people to write something, and they would choose like 15 different people to read things during the conference. And I never really thought of myself as a writer, but I wrote this piece and I submitted it, and I was chosen. I was the very last reader, and it was at the closing session. There were maybe 800 people, and my essay was entitled, "If He's the One Who's Sick, Why Do I Feel Like Dying?" And it was like what you're saying, Steve. People got up, they clapped, they stood in line as far as the eye could see. Can you send me a copy of that? How did you know my story? I need that. They gave me little pieces of paper with emails on it. It probably took 2 hours to get through the list of people, the line of individuals begging me for a copy of that. Can we put it in our newsletter? And I got home with all these bits of papers and scraps, and that was 1997. So as you know, technology is not what it was today. And I remember going, I should just write a book. And then saying, well, I'm not a writer. How do I write a book? And now we're on book 10. So I guess God was using that. But kind of like you, when someone says play it again, when you see a line of people, everybody begging to hear your words, it's humbling. And you know it's of God. It's nothing I could have created, nothing you could have created without God.
Carmen, I have to ask you something, having walked that road with caregiving and stuff, what is a word of encouragement that you could give someone who is currently, their feet are on that path and they're feeling like, just like you said, how you shared, how you felt. And I'm just wondering if you could reach out to them for a moment and give them a word of encouragement.
I don't know that it's going to come across as encouraging, but what I want to say to caregivers is it truly is going to be all up to you. Don't wait for someone else to stand in the gap. They may do small things, but what I have found is we are a country who loves disasters. We are so good when a house burns down. We are phenomenal when there's a hurricane. Oh my gosh, there's a car wreck. We are there. You don't get better in about 6 weeks. We as a nation move on to the next disaster. That doesn't sound really encouraging, but the reality is the encouragement is you can't expect people to change the very core of who we as a nation are. And that's truly what I believe. Having gone through a divorce, been a single mom, caregive, gone bankrupt, and now dealing with my own brain injury from a car wreck, I've had multiple times for people to stand up and be there for me, and they have failed and failed and failed, in my perspective. However, what I have gained, what I have learned, the woman I have become, the people that I can now reach out to, that I can say, and I'm going to cry. God allowed me to feel broken and forsaken, that nobody cared, so that when I meet somebody who feels that way, I identify with them. And I know how to be for that person. So it's not usually about having your needs met today. It's about you being prepared to meet someone else's need.
Absolutely. Maybe because it's part of my own journey too. But I think, we always think about, people are really quick, like you said, to show up right at the funeral. I deal a lot with the losses in my case. So people are right there at the funeral home and for the first few weeks, but then it's at the 6-month point. It's like the world keeps on spinning and you're still frozen in time trying to tread water, right? And I think that's a double thing, not just for the caregiver, but for those of us who are having loved ones and friends that are walking through that caregiving piece of life, which I feel like is almost a natural part of our existence sometimes. For some of us, we end up being the caregiver for parents or whatever. But it's that reminder on don't just leave it at the funeral home. Show up later. Show up later. Remember the anniversary. Remember that they are still carrying the load of caring for another every single day. And you just so poignantly put that out there. That was good. Thank you.
The other thing I want to tell caregivers is it really is up to you. And that means you have to be proactive. Nobody will be a better caregiver than you. Nobody. But there has to be a plan. And no one told me this tip, but it's the best tip that I ever figured out is I got a stack of 3x5 cards. And I wrote needs, one to each card. And when people came up and they'd say, I am so sorry. I wish there was something I could do. And I would pull out my cards and I'd say, funny you should ask. Now I need my kids picked up from soccer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3:00. Is that something you could do? Or are you better at making a casket? What would you prefer? Because these are my needs. you prefer buying toiletries, that works too. I never had anybody say no. They would all take a card and they would all do it. There are tips that you can do. There are things that will help you help others.
Mm.
And once they start, often it will continue.
That's a brilliant idea.
The other thing is don't be afraid to say no, thank you. Because some of the things that people are offering you are things you don't need. Or I'll give you an example. We would love to bring you a casserole. We'd love to bring you dinner. And I would flat out, knowing the quality of some of this cooking, no, I'm sorry. I would just not be honest. I would say that would be so wonderful. But you know what would be even better? My kids take school lunch. If you could do bread and meat in baggies and then do a whole bag of maybe tomatoes and lettuce slices and then maybe some condiments, that would help me get them ready for school for their lunch. Could you do that for a week? Because that is what I really need.
Instead of 18 casserole dishes of shepherd's pie, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Been there. Yeah.
And I would be so bold as to say, now I know it sounds really picky, but my children don't eat white bread. They've never had white bread. They eat like multigrain. Is that a problem? And that's what I got.
I love it.
So don't be afraid to be bold, to be very, very specific, because they're not mind readers. They don't know they're crummy cooks, or they're great cooks, but how many lasagnas can I handle?
There it is.
I only have so much freezer space. So being creative, that was a big part of it, is just learning how to ask. I used to do workshops, and I really should start doing them again, but it was started off for caregivers, and then it moved to single parents and different groups. And it says, how to shamelessly get what you need when no one seems to care. That's the Christian version. Okay, that's the nice version. You can fill the blank on the end of it. But how to shamelessly get what you need when no one seems to care? Because you're going to walk through as a caregiver, and how can they not tell your life is falling apart? Have you no compassion? Have you no empathy? How can you not know? Because they're fighting their own battles. They're living their own lives.
The average church falls away from a grieving family in about 2 weeks.
Yep.
2 weeks. And so one of the suggestions that I've made to people is look at your calendar and go 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out. Write that family's name on your calendar as a reminder to reach back out. And I think the same thing could be true for caregiving, because caregiving is a long haul type of experience. So yes, you can help today, but that doesn't prevent you from reaching out 6 months from now and saying, where are things now? How can I help now?
Caregiving comes in all different shapes and sizes. So there is not a one size fits all approach to caregiving, whether it's for you wanting to help your neighbor or for a church wanting to set up a ministry. One size does not fit all.
Why do you think music is important for caregivers?
Why isn't it important for everybody? You know, our entire lives are bound up in music. I could go and in fact, I have an entire file, which is nothing but quotes about music. And we're going to talk maybe about my next book coming out, but I use music in every single chapter. But I think whether it's the lullaby that we heard our mother singing to us at night when we were itsy bitsy, or even her singing in the womb, are those teenage songs where we could just be happy and carefree? Is it the music itself, or is it the poetry of the words? Everybody's going to be different, and everybody's going to have a different reason why music speaks to us. But there's a purity in music that is missing in a life that's fraught with despair. And it doesn't mean that every song is happy. It doesn't mean that we're joyful when we hear these songs. Some of the most profound songs for me are songs that make me cry. There are songs that draw me closer to God. People ask a lot, what's your favorite song? It's not usually a Christian song. It's usually a song that evokes a time in my life that I was happier. And so I just think that music, I love what you do. I was so captured by the whole concept of music for the soul, because it's not just caregiving. It's for any time in our life when everything goes downhill, we will always have music.
Well, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. And of course, I agree with you. I mean, when you talk about music making you cry, when I can feel that I need to cry, I actually have some go-to records that I put on. One of them is Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland.
I love that.
Any Randy Newman film score, like Awakenings, you can just close your eyes, lay on the floor, and let that music gently squeeze your heart, and just let the tears flow and let the healing come. So, right there with you. Well, you mentioned your book, and I do want to talk about that. And I know that you use a song title and a song theme for each chapter. Why did you decide to do that?
That makes no sense, does it? And after we got rear-ended, I suffered a traumatic brain injury and a lot of other issues that made it impossible for me to be me again. I would be a caregiver all over again a million times rather than have a brain injury, rather than have the assault be on me versus someone I love.
Yes.
And I couldn't do my job. It was really hard. And my doctor said, you should get a dog. I don't want a dog. I don't want to take care of nobody. I don't want a plant. I mean, no. And he continued saying, I really think a dog would help. So I got a dog. That dog saved my life. I didn't know how to be a dog mom. I didn't know dog mom was a phrase. So I treated my dog like a baby. And that first night, I put the dog in his little bed and I lay down next to him. And I did exactly what I did to my babies. Eyes, and opened his eyes, and I counted all his little paws, his toes, and I checked his ears, and I told him a secret. And then I sang to him. And I sang, you are so beautiful to me. You're everything I hope for. You're everything I need. You are so beautiful to me. And that brought me back to a time when I remembered that song and I remembered how I felt when I heard that song.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. And then I started to realize as I planned this book, I sing to this dog a lot. And the songs that I sing to my dog are always songs that are rooted in my life. They're songs that have made me who I am. And I thought, there's no rules to writing a book. So I decided I will write a book. And every chapter will have a song. And it's a song that relates to me and my dog. So that's how it came up, which is rather bizarre, but
I love that. Carmen, you are in good company. I had a rescue dog that really rescued me during my pregnancy losses. Lucy, she just crossed the Rainbow Bridge. So we were a very sorrowful house around here, but I love this part. I think it's in the intro of your book. It says, neither words nor music have ever let me down in times of celebration, depression, anger, loneliness, or the myriad of emotions we all experience. With the right words or music, you can either forget everything or you remember everything. And so it is with dogs. But I just loved that you're marrying the two, because those are two things in my own story that have kept me literally alive.
I'm sure that the dog lovers out there especially want to know how to get a hold of this book. The website is wagawaypublishing.com. The contact for Carmen is info@wagawaypublishing.com.
Oh, let me tell you the title of the subtitle.
The subtitle. Well, here it is. Imperfectly Perfect Rescue Dogs and Their Humans. And the title is I Chose You.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Carmen, for your time today and covering two very different topics, but I think things that are going to bless people to hear.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. And hi, Becky. So nice to finally meet you.
Thank you so much. It was a joy to have you on today and hear your story. Thank you for being honest and raw with us and sharing all of that with us and your encouragement. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please share it with a friend and give us a positive review on iTunes.
And please visit our website, musicforthesoul.org, where you can stream or download every song in our catalog, including Dignity, read our lyrics, our healing music guide, our blog posts, and much more. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.
the time when good health was mine. I miss who I used to be. And what I miss the most is my dignity. Because I feel ashamed, broken in bondage to this unresponsive frame. I can't tie my shoes, I can't comb my hair. I'm dependent for so many needs, and no one wants to live without dignity. I look in your eyes, and to my surprise, when you look at me, you see more than a disease. It's by your caring that I am getting through. You have been Jesus when only He would do. When this is hard, know deep in your heart the gift that you've given to me. That gift is nothing less. That gift is